Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Francine Schertzer. Today we'll talk about school funding. But first, we're joined by Ed Mann, investigative reporter for Spotlight PA. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You wrote that Spotlight PA scrutiny over the state's medical marijuana program prompted lawmakers to move a bill that includes doctor oversight. What concerns did the original Spotlight PA reporting reveal?
Our stories focused on certification practices by doctors in Pennsylvania's medical marijuana program. There are tens of thousands of doctors in the state. There are about 1,900 who participate in the medical marijuana program, but a very small number account for a very large share of certifications. Our findings found a small number accounted for about a third of certifications. There were a handful of doctors who each approved 11,000 or more certifications in a single year. And we heard from lawmakers and other doctors, other medical marijuana doctors as well, just questions and concerns to varying degrees about how one doctor can provide adequate care and oversight to so many patients in a year.
Could you talk a little bit about the process you went through to access those records?
Sure. So this goes back to 2021. We were reporting on some issues with the medical marijuana program and concerns. We filed a right to know request. We won the right to know request in the Office of Open Records. That's the independent state agency, as many people know, that settles open records disputes. They ruled in our favor. The Department of Health appealed to Commonwealth Court. We were represented pro bono by Paula Knudsen-Burke of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. Through that litigation, we won access to some data. We also set new legal precedent as well. And then later, when we asked for the doctor certification records, went through a similar process again, went to Commonwealth Court. This time, through mediation, we reached an agreement that the Department of Health would agree to hand over this records, and it really established that this information is available to the public.
Does it feel gratifying to know that lawmakers were citing the data of Spotlight PA as they were proposing legislation on this program?
So they did cite us on the House floor, on the House committee hearings, and we went after this data because we believed it was important for the public to understand how this program is working so you can have a better debate, a better, more informed debate. And so it's good to see that lawmakers are also looking at this data as well.
How has the Department of Health and the Department of State responded, particularly to the fact that 3 doctors approved over 11,000 medical cards each?
So the Department of Health has said that looking at certification numbers alone provides limited insight. Doctors' practices can vary, their behaviors can vary, and their areas of focus can vary. The Department of Health over the past year, they have talked about how conversations about this oversight have intensified, and that corresponds to the time period of our reporting as well. During Senate budget hearings, Senator Rosemary Brown asked both the Secretary for the Department of Health and the Secretary for the Department of State about these issues. The Department of Health Secretary talked about how the limited oversight that they have, but she also said that they are happy to discuss whether that should change, whether they should have more power in their view. And the Secretary for the Commonwealth called the numbers extraordinary, but he also said their investigations are complaint-driven.
Under the proposed legislation, what additional standards would be imposed upon physicians who have the ability to prescribe medical marijuana cards?
It's interesting. So the legislation gives the Department of Health power to impose certain conditions on physicians. The Department of Health does not have to impose these conditions, but what they could do is place doctors on probation, limit the number of certifications they are allowed to issue, which is a significant one in terms of our reporting, mandate supervision by another practitioner. And I think that's fairly common in Department of State medical licensing issues, to have some increased supervision by another practitioner, and impose additional reporting requirements. The legislation also says the department could impose other conditions it determines are necessary to protect the health and safety of patients in the program. And the idea that the way this is talked about is they would do this for individual doctors based on circumstances. And that was one of the concerns. We wrote about it. A doctor who had been disciplined was seeking to return to the program. We got a lot of different views about whether he should be allowed to return to the program. And we talked to someone who's on the very much pro-marijuana side of it, who thought that these rules could be beneficial just to create some standards across the board so everybody knows what to expect.
The amended bill passed the House. Have you gotten any indication of how the Senate will respond or whether they will move this bill as well?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what action there is during the ongoing legalization debate of recreational cannabis use. Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman, he told us that it is clear Pennsylvania's medical marijuana program was not implemented well and could benefit from potential changes to make the program more airtight, efficient, and productive. So he signaled openness to this bill. Senate Democrats, they're in favor of this bill, but they told me they want full legalization for adult use. And it's in the committee. The committee where it's sitting right now is chaired by State Senator Dan Laughlin, who has supported a number of cannabis changes, including adult use legalization, but also changes to the medical program that would make it, essentially more patient friendly, is the fairer way to put it.
Ed Mann, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after this short break.
Tuesday night on PCN.
And one day in particular, she reported that she was sick and she wanted to go to bed. And Dr. Schupa came over and saw her and supposedly treated her. And the next morning, the owner of the hotel went up and found that she was in her bed. She was still breathing, but unresponsive.
It doesn't matter what part of the state you're from. One thing is certain, Pennsylvania loves sports. On the first Friday of the month, PCN takes you inside the lines at 6 p.m. PCN delivers insight from the people who cover sports from every corner of the Commonwealth. From high school to college to professional sports, PCN takes you inside the lines. Learn more at PCNTV.com.
Welcome back. Our guests today are Edward Albert, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Association of Rural and Small Schools, Jeff Piccola, Board Chair of Commonwealth Charter Academy, and Donna Cooper, Executive Director of Children First PA. Donna, we'll start with you. It's been roughly 2 months since Governor Josh Shapiro proposed his $51.4 billion budget. How responsive has the Shapiro administration been to the Commonwealth Court's decision that stated Pennsylvania schools were underfunded?
Very responsive. I mean, the entire legislature last year made a very big step forward in putting resources on the table in a formula that responds to what Judge Jubileer found to be massive disparities and violation of the Constitution. So last year's budget was a big step forward, and the governor proposed, and the House Democrats have expressed their support for another second payment towards the overall gap of about $4.5 billion. So I would say I give them great credit for doing that. I think they've begun to cure some of the structural challenges with protecting declining enrollment districts. We have about 300 districts that continue to lose students because people are leaving their communities. So they're protecting them while also putting resources in the districts that the courts found were significantly treated unfairly in the state's funding formula, some of them even being those declining enrollment districts. So I give them a good mark in that regard.
Edward Albert, your thoughts on the administration's responsiveness to that court decision?
I think the governor has really stepped up with putting money into the budget to help struggling schools. I think as much as I emphasize, I think he's done a great job. I would hope that would continue, because I don't think it's either a 1 or 2 year shot. Schools have responded very nicely to that. And we're, as a group that was part of the lawsuit, PARS, one of the only groups with a lot of support from other organizations throughout the state, we were very happy with what the governor has, what he proposed last year and what went through and what's being proposed for this year.
Jeff Piccola, your thoughts?
Well, I'm not here to criticize or commend the governor on his choices with regard to education funding. I'll just say this. I spent 36 years in the General Assembly, and virtually every one of those years, the General Assembly passed huge increases to public education. Education has not improved. It has declined. I'm not sure money is the reason. I don't know how, with the infusion of, what was it, close to $1 billion last year of new money, I'm not sure how that's sustainable for the taxpayers of Pennsylvania. But I don't have those responsibilities anymore. So I'm not going to comment whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I just hope that the districts will use the money in a way that improves education. We have declining enrollment in this Commonwealth, and yet the dramatic increases in spending just do not match that declining enrollment.
Well, perhaps to build onto that, the governor's proposal this year includes a $526 million adequacy payment. In addition, can the state afford to keep expanding this?
I don't know. I don't keep day-to-day contact with the budgetary issues facing the Commonwealth because I've been retired from the Senate for about 12 years now. I don't know how you do it. But if the governor thinks it can be done and the legislature agrees, I guess they're going to do it.
Donna, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, first of all, look, we have a state court that's found the way that we fund the schools unconstitutional. So we have some decisions to make. If we want to be in constitutional compliance, we either have to cut state spending to make sure there's enough resources for solving the constitutional crisis and how we fund our schools, or we have to increase revenues to make that possible. Without question, to come up with the shortfall is going to make some tough choices. Now, as I mentioned, there's about 300 school districts with declining enrollment, and the former senator pointed out the state's enrollment is declining, but there's several hundred schools where the enrollment is growing, including where I live in the Southeast. Most of the school districts have growing enrollment. So that the overall enrollment is declining is very minuscule statewide, yes, but it's not everywhere. And so we have in this state kind of a gentleman's agreement where as school districts lose kids, we don't cut their state spending to send to those with enrollment. We could. There's 642,000 students that the Commonwealth is paying for in declining enrollment school districts that could be reallocated to the growing enrollment school districts. But it really wouldn't make sense. Their communities are very poor. Their tax base couldn't make up for the shortfall that would happen from the state. So you'd have rural Pennsylvanians having property tax increases. I don't think many state lawmakers want to see that. So at the end of the day, we have to make some tough choices. We've got to offer a quality education. And the senator pointed out he was there for 35 years, and we put more money into education nearly every one of those years, and that's true. But compared to the states that have significant academic achievement growth compared to Pennsylvania, we're still, we're below, the 42nd lowest state in terms of per student expenditure. And if you're in a wealthy district, you can make up for that. I live in the Southeast. Lower Merion homeowners can make up for what the state isn't doing. But in Norristown, that's not so easy. So it's more complicated than just sort of like a broad brush on where the state's declining. We have formulas that are intended to make sure we're beginning to offer kids in the lowest wealth school districts what they need. We need to keep doing that. And it's going to mean tough choices ahead. If we don't do that, we just continue to put the burden on property taxpayers in the poorest communities. And that's a race to the bottom, without question.
Edward, we'll come to you. How does Pennsylvania compare to other states in terms of the state helping to fund schools?
I'm sorry, is that question? I didn't hear you in the beginning.
Yes, please. How does Pennsylvania compare to other states for school funding?
Well, as Donna pointed out, I think we're like 48th. And I would say, yes, we have always gotten increases. But I think where the issue here is there's some school districts who have a lot, and there's other districts who have basically nothing. One of the things that I take great pride in my position is I travel a lot. So I want to go to districts. I don't want to be sitting somewhere and hearing this. So let's take the school district of the Austin School District, which is probably the smallest district. Just to point out to you what this district looks like. When the 12 seniors are walking into the cafeteria, when they walk out, the 12 kindergarten kids are walking in. So that's the setting there. And I don't think people always realize what those situations look like. Very small town. They do not have PetSmart, Dollar General, or Amazon to have a huge tax base. Personally, if the school wasn't there, tumbleweed would almost go through the town. So they don't have the remediation programs. They don't have the foreign language programs. As we pointed out in the lawsuit, Lower Merion might be offering 6 foreign language courses. Austin is lucky to offer perhaps one. So why should a kid be penalized because of the zip code they live in? It doesn't make any sense to me. And the other thing I have to make a comment on, if we don't want to value education, what's that going to really do for our future? I mean, ignorance doesn't work.
Jeff, I'm going to come to you for a moment. Besides money, what else can be done to improve education? What kind of policy would you like to see move?
Well, before I comment on that, I don't mean to question my co-panelists' figures, but when I was chairman of the Education Committee, Pennsylvania was near the top, in the top 10 for sure, states in per pupil expenditures for public education, but we were down near the bottom 10 when it came to academic performance. So I don't know. I'd like to see their numbers because I don't think they've changed that much in the last 12 years. But what I would like to see, and it goes to what my role is right now as chairman of the board at Commonwealth Charter Academy, CCA, is I'd like to see more school choice. I'd like to see parents be able to take that money that we're appropriating and take it with them to the academic institution of their choice that they feel is best for their student. We have, and this speaks to the disparity of what we are spending on education. We have districts in this state, I imagine most of them are down in Donna's area of the state, the Southeast, that are spending over $40,000 per child. And then we have others in some of the more rural areas that are spending $10,000 or $12,000 per child. That is a huge disparity. It was alluded to, we had the hold harmless proposition, which means any district that gets state money never loses that state money. They always get more, usually get more because it's a percentage increase. And that just over years and time, that just builds and builds and builds, and you see the disparity. It's a complicated problem. I don't claim that it's simple, because if it was simple, we'd have fixed it a long time ago. But I think school choice is the answer. Get these kids to the institution that best suits their needs. My philosophy has always been every kid can learn. You just have to learn what buttons to push for those particular kids, because every kid learns in a different way, different manner, has different drawbacks and different benefits.
Maybe for the education of our viewers that may not be aware, can you explain where do cyber charters and charters fit into the budget puzzle, and basically what would you like our viewers to know about them that there may be misconceptions perhaps? Well,
the charters and the cyber charters get no real direct funding from the Commonwealth. A tuition rate for a charter school is determined by a formula that is made up of how much a district, the sending district, the district in which the child lives, how much that district spends on the education of that child. And certain costs are backed out of that formula, which results in a tuition rate in each district of about 70 to 75% of what they spend on the cost of educating one child. It's a slightly different formula for special ed. And that is the tuition rate that goes to the charter or the cyber charter school. They keep the other 25% or 30%, the district does, but they don't have the responsibility for educating the child, except that they keep that child on their WADM, their average daily membership. So they have benefits because they keep the money and they keep the child on their records.
Governor Shapiro is proposing an $8,000 per student tuition rate for cyber charters. How would that impact cyber charter schools?
It put them out of business. I mean, if our charter tuition rate was $8,000, we couldn't even pay our teachers because, and our teachers don't make nearly what some of the union organized teachers are making. It's totally unrealistic. I mean, it's being proposed by people who are opposed to school choice. Governor Shapiro talks a good game. He claims he's for school choice, but I've seen no evidence that he really is for school choice. And there's evidence based on that number that you just recited that he's really opposed to school choice.
I'd like to pose that question both to Donna and Edward as well. The governor's proposing $8,000 cyber charter tuition rate. How would that affect school districts?
Yeah, well, let me first explain to the viewers that there's a couple ways to think about how much the state spends on education. So Senator Piccola pointed out that the state is one of the top, was one of the top spending states in the country. We've always been a little bit above average, not quite in the top 10 for total spending, how much the community, the state, and the federal government puts into schools. And sadly, we've been always at the bottom since 1991, bottom 40 and below 40 for the amount the state puts into schools. So the denominator matters. It's sort of basic math. And I encourage the good senator to think about what I'm saying is the state dollars per student. What he's saying is the total dollars. And the total dollars is affected dramatically by high wealth communities that can make up for the shortfall in state funding. So that's just one to make sure the viewers know his number's accurate, my number's accurate. They're just two different maths. And I'm looking at what's our state putting in, because the smaller the state share is, the more the burden is on the property taxpayers. Now, in terms of the governor's proposal of $8,000. So look, if I'm a kid from Lower Merion and I go to a cyber charter, the cyber charter is being paid probably $28,000, $29,000 for me to attend that school. And if I'm a kid from Reading, that tuition rate is set by school district based on the state formula, and I am probably sending the cyber charter $11,000 a year. So the cyber charter is giving the kid from Lower Merion and the kid from Reading the same education, but has a pretty vast disparity or range of how much is being paid per student. And so one of the things that the governor's proposal, and I will say the governor before him, and bipartisan lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, have been trying to do is rationalize that, to say, look, why don't we pay the cybers a standard rate, since what they're doing per child is not differentiated by school districts. And if it was, it would be illegal to begin with. And one final point on the question of how come school districts keep some of the money before they pay a tuition to the cyber charters or the charters. Well, one thing specifically for charters is the school district's still responsible for busing students to get them to their charter school. So number one, they're keeping the cost of transportation. School districts also receive money for books for non-public schools. That should not obviously be passed on to a charter school, because it's actually meant for the parochial schools in the community. So the equation of how the lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, have agreed to make sure that all the money due to the charters is getting to them is appropriate. And then the question is, does choice really work? And I can just tell you down here, parents are mostly choosing the public schools. 9 out of 10 kids go to public school. In my school district where I live in Philly, it's 50-50. So a lot of parents are choosing charter schools. But the performance in the charter schools and the performance in the regular schools is equally the same. 35% of our kids on reading in 4th grade in the regular schools, 35% of the kids reading on grade level in the charters is the same. And the reason is because the input of what it takes to educate kids who are in high poverty, transient communities is more expensive. And if people want choice and they want quality charter schools, and they want results, no matter where you do it, it's going to require more money, because the children who are choosing those charter schools in our cities have enormous learning needs that remain unmet under the current funding system.
There's one deficiency in Ms. Cooper's analysis, and that is
only one, Jeff. You would
well, there's a lot more, but the one that I would point out, is that the students coming from Lower Merion, their parents are paying local taxes. That's what goes into making up the formula for the tuition rate. So, by just saying there's going to be a flat rate of some sort, and I don't know how you even determine what that is, but that there's going to be a flat rate of some sort is denying the student from Lower Merion the access to the dollars that flow from their local taxes and that are contributed by the Commonwealth, even though Lower Merion gets a very small percentage of Commonwealth dollars. It's denying them that. So, and I also would say that transportation is backed out of that formula. We don't, cybers and charters don't receive money for transportation.
Edward, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to this as well regarding the governor's proposed standardized tuition rate and what effect that would have on rural and small schools.
Well, let me just kind of go back to a comment that was made by the senator, and certainly going to be respectful. I think there was a time where the argument was made to get rid of cyber charter. I'm not so sure I bump into anybody now that has that argument. I know I don't. It has its place. I think the argument now is the funding. There might be a kid, let's go back to the Austin School District, if I may use that again. There might be a kid that the parents are on a limited income, and he or she might have to work to help pay the bills. So going to perhaps a brick and mortar school during the day and working and trying to do that would be a difficult task. So obviously I'm going to be promoting public education, but I'm not going to sit here and argue and say, geez, we're going to fight tooth and nail so it's abolished, eliminated, etc. for cyber schools. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Our concern is the way it's funding, and the playing field is not the same. For example, I was a superintendent in the Tulpehocken area school district. I wonder what my conservative board would have said if I would have gone out and put up a billboard on Route 78 saying, come to our school, to the tune of $2,000-3,000 a month paying for that billboard. I probably would have been tarred and feathered, because we can't do that in public education. We can't do that at all. I can go on a bunch of other things with other examples, but I won't. But I do want to point something out. I was part of a committee with a senator just a year or two ago that we were told that we have to do 3 things to come up so we can come to agreement with cyber charter. It was the House has to approve something, the Senate has to approve something, then the governor. Well, we did 1/3 of those things. It was House Bill 1422, in which a few Republicans had voted for that. So that was one piece of legislation that passed. But ever since that, it hasn't really gone anywhere. So I thought if we were supposed to have 3 different groups come together, well, to me, unless I'm doing math incorrectly, we have 1/3 has come through with putting something on paper, and why not talk about it?
Well, the reason is because that's the $8,000 bill, which would have put, number one, would have put cybers out of business, and number two, it would be grossly unfair to the rural and small school districts, because according to my math, let's just say Lower Merion's tuition rate or per pupil expenditure is about $40,000, and a small school district is $12,000 per student. If you have a flat rate of $8,000, the small district may not get any benefit at all, because they're so close to that flat rate that they might not get any benefit at all. So you haven't even addressed the problem, the alleged problem that the small and rural school districts have, and it would have been a boon to the wealthy districts. So it's just not fair the way that bill was crafted.
Well, I think, Jeff, first of all, Senator, you're right. I want to say that the transportation funds are not backed out. You're absolutely right. I appreciate that correction. Other funds are backed out that are just the onus of a school district that are not on a cyber charter or a regular charter. But in this case, don't do such a broad brush on the rurals. So Ed Albert talked about Austin Area School District 2 years ago, because they have lost so many students and they get so much resources from the state. They are a very high spending school district. The highest spending school district in the state right now is Forest Area School District. So like some rural school districts actually would see a benefit, but I don't think that's really, your argument so much as you're saying at $8,000, we would go out of business. So I think the question is, what does it take to appropriately educate a student in a cyber charter? We know that the range of payment, according to the Attorney General's audit, was somewhere between $11,000 and $28,000. So what is the appropriate now? Not what do the taxpayers of Lower Merion buy, because they're not getting more out of cyber than the kid from Norristown, but what's the appropriate amount to pay them? You have long been an advocate of really good government efficiency. And the charter that you're on the board of has nearly a 20% fund balance. So clearly, we need to be thinking.
That's not right.
Well, the Auditor General found it was $236 million on a $1 billion budget.
The Auditor General lumped in our capital fund balance, which we can't touch, with our regular fund balance, which is minuscule. It's only a couple $100,000. So
if the Auditor General made a mistake, then the citizens of Pennsylvania have been misled.
The Auditor General made a lot of mistakes in that audit, but
and I think actually the idea that you can't touch certain parts of your fund balance is something we could have a deeper conversation about.
Sure.
Mr. Albert was a school director and he knows these tricks of the trade better than most. But the fact is that what is the amount? I think that's really the question. I mean, it's reasonable that if a kid's attending a school, like if I go to Lower Merion and there's 5 elementary schools, there's a common tuition rate among them. If I'm going to a Commonwealth Charter Academy, what should be the amount that Commonwealth Charter Academy should be paid? Clearly the current system isn't rational. And so
well, actually, it's extremely,
come to the table with a number.
It's extremely rational. It's based upon how much a sending school district is raising or receiving to educate one child.
It should be based on what it costs you to educate.
No, it shouldn't. It should be based upon what that child is going to receive in that district.
Okay.
Okay, you made a point, sir. Respectfully, again, you made a point with the exception of special ed. Let's talk about special ed when it comes to cyber
Which,
schools.
incidentally, we had cybers were cut in special ed during the last budget cycle. So we did get a funding decrease last year.
What I'd like to do, why not implement a tiered system to pay for special educations just as it is in districts? You don't have that tiered system. So the average being paid per IEP student does not accurately reflect the payment for services rendered.
I think you'll find that is no longer the case. I think as of the first of the year that system has been put in place for cybers.
I'm going to jump in right here. We need to take a very brief break and we'll continue our discussion in just a moment. But first, we're going to look at what's coming up on PCN. Tomorrow on the PCN Capitol Preview, we'll talk about transportation funding. Our guests will be members of the Senate Transportation Committee. Judy Ward, the Majority Chair, and Democrat Tim Carney will join us. They're here tomorrow live at 9 a.m. The unsolved death of Maria Stenik is a police case about a doctor accused of murdering his patient in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Author Mark Poduia tells the story Tuesday at 8 p.m. On the Issues Wednesday has the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association, Aaron Chapin, on the subject of funding for public schools. He's here at 7 o'clock. And then right after that, we'll talk about property tax with Representative Robert Freeman. You can watch that Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Journalist Roundtable guests this week will be Jillian McGoldrick from the Philadelphia Inquirer, Jackson White from LNP and Lancaster Online, and Steve Ulrich from Politics PA. They'll have the latest news from the state capitol Thursday at 7 p.m. The Pennsylvania Leadership Conference has among their guests Attorney General Dave Sunday, Auditor General Tim DeFore, Treasurer Stacey Garrity, and U.S. Senator Dave McCormick. That's Friday live at 11 a.m. More Pennsylvania Leadership Conference over the weekend. U.S. Representatives Scott Perry and Dan Muser are here Saturday at 7 a.m. And then Steve Moore and Jonathan Williams of the American Legislative Exchange Council appear at the conference Saturday at 12 noon. The public affairs coverage you watch on PCN TV is now free online. Go to PCNTV.com and check out our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. Let's get back into our discussion. Now, Jeff, during the conversation a moment ago, there was a reference to the Auditor General's report. So I just want to bring up actually two reports. In January 2025, Education Voters of Pennsylvania released a report that found that Commonwealth Charter Academy spent millions of dollars on non-school related purchases from January 2022 through June of 23. And then separately, in February of 2025, the Auditor General's report cited over a 3-year period 5 cyber charters that amassed what they characterized as excessive reserves and highlighted uncommon spending practices. So I'll give you a chance to address those two reports.
As far as the education voters, they received information from us as a result of a right to know request, which we freely gave them. We're subject to the same rules and regulations that all school districts are subject to. We're a public school, and the voter ed ran the stuff we gave them and added or forgot to put decimal points in. So, I don't have all those numbers in front of me, but they were thousands of dollars off. They were forced to take that off their website and indicate that they were in error. The Auditor General's report actually found that we did not spend $1 inappropriately. There was not $1 of public money that was spent contrary to law or contrary to good accounting procedures. Where they were, I think, misinformed is that they did not have any understanding of how cyber charters work. They did their entire audit remotely, from not even from the Auditor General's office, but from their homes, wherever they were. And they never visited one of our schools or one of our facilities until we invited them to come for one visit after they had already made their preliminary report. So I don't know how you can question or raise the issue of our fund balance, which is designed to pay for capital expenses, or how you can question the use of our vehicles. We're a statewide organization. We have a footprint over the entire Commonwealth. We have 35,000 students as of now. Back then, we had about 23,000, I think, when that audit ended. So the Auditor General did not have an appreciation, I think, for what cyber education is all about. The question that I think is paramount is what is the parent? What do the parents really want for their child? What's in the best interest of their child? We get a lot of our students because they're experiencing bullying, safety concerns. They have scheduling conflicts. They have medical issues. So I don't know how you deal with that without having some sort of cyber education, a quality cyber education. School districts are setting up their own programs, and they're free to do that, but they don't seem to be meeting the needs that parents want.
How do cybers and charter schools compare with traditional schools regarding both performance as well as accountability?
What kind of performance?
How do charters and cyber charters compare to traditional in-person schools regarding accountability and performance?
Well, first of all, we are required to provide all the statewide assessments, PSSAs, Keystone exams, et cetera. The problem with the PSSAs is that they're given in the spring, but you don't get the results until sometime in the fall. We may not even have the student by then. The teachers don't have access when it's necessary to have access to remediate those kids. What we do at CCA is we have a program called iReady, which we assess children at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, and at the end of the year. The teachers can use that as a diagnostic to help the kids do the work that they're a little bit behind on, try to get them moving forward to get up to their class where they're supposed to be. Most of the kids that come to us are behind 2 or 3 grade levels, maybe more. And you can't make that up in a year. That takes multiple years to make up. And so we're taking the students from, for example, Philadelphia or some of the low performing districts, and we get, they come to us as they are, and we have to try to remediate them as best we can, and we're doing a pretty good job of it.
Donna and Edward, I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk as well about comparisons regarding accountability as well as performance.
Yeah. So look, the the law to create charters in Pennsylvania, and the senator knows this better than any of us on this call, was passed, 25 years ago. And it did not envision the extraordinary changes that have happened in the education landscape. So for instance, when the law was passed, the idea that we would have the largest cyber enrollment in the country in Pennsylvania probably wasn't really well understood. And so the accountability systems that are needed to be expressed in statute aren't there. The senator is absolutely right. The Auditor General didn't find anything obnoxiously outside the letter of the law, but did raise questions about having more than 24 buildings, very large fleet. Is this essential for the operation of a cyber school? And if it is, then maybe we need to rethink this, because we have traditional school districts, bricks and mortar charter schools, and now we're creating again yet another physical infrastructure that's expensive for cyber schools. Certainly not something well understood in the beginning. The degree to which we have clarity on participation in PSSAs, one of the things that we see among cyber schools is not uniform participation in the state's assessment system. And it's a requirement under federal law, number one. But number two, it's how we can compare apples to apples rather than apples to oranges. So using a different assessment makes it impossible to compare. So a public school district has to make sure 95% of its kids show up for the PSSAs, because you need to know how the whole district is doing. In the case of the cybers, there's much lower, they're less assiduous about hitting that 95% mark. So again, if there's children who are struggling that aren't included in the PSSAs, we can't do apples to apples. These are not saying that the cyber charters are breaking the law, but that the law, when created, was not necessarily able to envision what's happening now. We need to update our law. We're spending more than $1 billion easily in the state on cyber charters, the state that spends the most with a law that's more than 25 years old, that could be improved to, one, make sure we have rational payment, high quality instruction, either eyes wide open or closed about infrastructure, limitations on fund balance consistent with school districts, special ed payments consistent with school districts. And then we can begin to say, hey, this is a good option because it's regulated appropriately and we can ensure we can compare performance.
Yeah, I would like to add, and I want to emphasize this one more time. I don't think there's anybody in my professional circles that are saying eliminate cyber charter. I think what we're saying exactly what Donna just said. Let's make the playing field. Senator, you mentioned that you get kids sometimes from a school district that are 2-3 years behind. Is that a fair statement,
Yes,
Senator?
very fair.
Okay. I'm glad we agree on that. So we get a kid who comes from a terrible home life. Parents aren't reading to the kid. They're not taking the kid out to do all the things that we always know you should do. And that kid comes to us technically in kindergarten. Well, in 3rd grade, he's taking a PSSA test. So if you say it takes 2-3 years to bring people up to speed, I would agree with you. But we in public education can't put pixie dust on Skippy, so to speak, and say he's going to be passing the PSSA test in 3rd grade. So we have similar problems.
I think that's a universal problem. But the problem that we experience, and I will admit that the participation rates for PSSAs in cybers is lower, but every parent in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has the right to have their child not participate in statewide testing. Regular public schools, charter public schools. So the problem that we have to provide a secure facility for those tests to be administered. That costs us money because the kids are normally at home. So we rent facilities. We have our family service centers, which have been criticized. They are used for that many times. But we still cannot get parents, because a lot of them came to us because they didn't like what they were facing in the regular public schools. And one of those is testing. So we get maybe 20%, 25%, but we get penalized on our performance because, as you know, Donna, I think it's the feds that say if you're below 90% participation, all the kids in the difference between that and what you do have in participation are not proficient. That's about, in our case, probably 70% of our kids. We know for a fact that many of those, a large percentage of those, are proficient or even above proficient. So there's got to be a better way to do the assessments. I'm hoping that the Trump administration will get rid of this thing that came out of No Child Left Behind and get rid of this statewide testing and let us figure out how we assess our kids, and more importantly than assessing them, get them up to grade level, get them graduated. And one of the things that we're doing at CCA is that we have a works program designed to make kids career ready. And I invite any listener, Donna, Ed, Francine, come and visit CCA. We can show you AgWorks at our Capitol campus. We can show you TechWorks out in Pittsburgh. We can show you MedWorks down in Malvern. That's convenient for you, Donna. Please visit. We're in the process of creating a TradeWorks up in the Scranton area where we are training kids to have a job. We had a graduation last year. Let me tell you a good story. We had a graduation up in Wilkes-Barre last year where 5 or 6 kids walked across the stage. They got their high school diploma at the beginning of the stage. And on the other side of the stage, the president of Johnson College handed them a certificate or a college degree from Johnson College because they were able to participate in a dual enrollment program at no cost to them. CCA paid for that, and they had jobs ready to go as soon as they got off that graduation stage. That's the kind of work we're doing. You don't do that inexpensively. That costs money.
Now, before we run out of time,
Well, I totally agree it costs money.
I just want to, I'm sorry, Donna, I just want to shift our focus very briefly because we only have a minute or two left. One thing that will affect education in general, earlier this month, President Trump announced his plans to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. How do you see that affecting Pennsylvania? Donna, we'll come to you first.
Yeah, well, first of all, just on the example that the senator used, which is, are we going to have federal funds that support career tech ed in our high schools? Tens of thousands of kids across Pennsylvania have that same experience in their traditional public school or their bricks and mortar cyber school, charter school, or their cyber. Those funds are made possible in part from career tech ed. It's not so much for the cybers, for bricks and mortar and traditional public schools. Number one, will that happen? IDEA funds. Right now, the Trump administration is saying they're going to keep special ed funds. We're not so clear about that because there's a demand to squeeze the federal budget. And then fundamentally, the money for Title I that goes to every school in the Commonwealth. So there's a risk in this administration. It's unclear. Are they reorganizing the government or reducing the government? Depends on, what day you're reading the newspaper or what you take away from that. Philadelphia School District, for instance, would lose 10% of its funds. Pittsburgh School District, the same. So we're at great risk. And I think that the inspiring example that the senator used of the kids who are getting high school opportunities like dual enrollment, that should be happening everywhere. We shouldn't be having this argument, is that good for cybers or charters or regular districts? If we were funding our school districts adequately, we would not be having this argument. And that's what the governor's proposal is attempting to do day one.
Edward, your thoughts?
My comment is I'm going to be, Donna's points I respect and obviously understand. I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic. I'm looking at it as a reorganization. I think to eliminate special ed funding, eliminate Title I funding would be catastrophic. And so I'm praying and obviously hoping and being obviously optimistic that that is not going to be the case. And if it was the case, then all the money that we just got, that everybody says we got tons and tons of money, all we'd be doing is backfilling everything that we lost. So to lose funding for all those programs, I'm just being very optimistic that that won't happen.
Jeff Piccola, you get the last word.
Okay, I agree with Ed. I think the funds will be there. In fact, they may even be enhanced with the elimination of waste, fraud, and abuse in the Department of Education. You don't need a lot of bureaucrats down there to just send out money. One other point I'd like to make before we end, and that is the criticism of our buildings and our fund balances. We have no debt whatsoever at CCA. We put our fund balances into our capital reserves where we can't touch it unless we spend it on a capital project. So it's already earmarked when we put it in there. That's something I think any school district would love to have, no debt, because we have no debt service.
We're going to end right there. Donna Cooper, Executive Director of Children First PA. Edward Albert, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Association of Rural and Small Schools, and Jeff Piccola, Board Chair of Commonwealth Charter Academy. Thank you all for your time. Earlier, PCN spoke with Representative Mary Jo Daley about wildlife corridors in the state.
Welcome to our program. You helped release a report recently about wildlife corridors. Can you explain what those are?
Sure. So they are a way for wildlife, deer, and a lot of smaller animals to get from one side of the road to the other. So they could be something that's over the road, something that's under the road, depending, and that's basically what they are. It's just to cut down the number of vehicular accidents involving wildlife, which I think we'd all be happy about.
What did this report say?
The report really pulled together what actually there's two reports. There was a report that was done in 2023 by the Legislative Budget and Finance Center, and they basically were looking at the current status of conservation connectivity in Pennsylvania. The report that was just recently took the report from the Legislative Budget and Finance Center, but then it also did some work in creating or investigating a variety of case studies where the Game Commission, the Fish and Boat Commission, and the Department of Community and Natural Resources had done work to create safe crossings for wildlife. And I think there were 10 different case studies from across the state. And with those two commissions and then the department working on them, it was really an interesting report because they were very creative in sometimes how they addressed the situations that they found.
Do you know the number of wildlife corridors there are in Pennsylvania currently?
I don't think that we got the exact number. I'd have to go look at the report and give you a number, but I think they are around the state. Part of the problem had been that we didn't really know where they all were, and they were managed by different organizations and different owners. So that was a part of getting the initial study and just getting a grasp on it. But I think it's one of those topics that will continue to garner attention.
Have you heard, are they successful at keeping animals safe?
If they're built, yes, they are successful. I mean, one of the pictures in the study that was just put out shows a family of bears, and I think there are 4 or 5 bears in the picture going underneath a road. And I don't know, it was consoling to see that because, we also read stories about deer being, hit, or even bears can often be in traffic accidents, and it's kind of sad.
So you mentioned that these corridors were put in place by different organizations and not the state, correct?
Well, they're all state organizations. The Department of DCNR, they look after the forest and the parks, and so they have them. The Game Commission has the game lands and has been able to increase, and the Game Commission really pays a lot of attention to habitat. And so part of the reason we were interested in this is because when the habitat is separated, the animals aren't as healthy, they're in smaller spaces, and so, and then they're more prone to be on the roads where we don't want them. So the Game Commission, I think, has just done a tremendous job in looking out for habitat of animals. And then the Fish and Boat Commission, we have amphibians and we have fish and we have turtles. I don't know who takes care of the turtles, but they are a part of one of the case studies. And so, these folks, this is their job, and they are independent commissions in the state. And I think they do a really good job.
Lastly, what inspired you to get involved with these wildlife corridors?
I was at a meeting of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, and I was looking for something that would be bipartisan. And I went to one of their sessions, and they were talking about them, and I got interested that way. And that's a number of years ago, but the other part of it was I live in Montgomery County, and in my district, we have deer, and therefore we have vehicular accidents related to deer. And according to the Game Commission, we feed them too much or we feed them too well, so they're not going to leave. And so it seemed like if we could really look at this issue, and that's what interested me.
Representative Mary Jo Daley, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ellen.
That concludes today's show. The PCN Capitol Preview returns tomorrow for a look at transportation funding. Our guests will be members of the Senate Transportation Committee, Judy Ward, Majority Chair, and Democrat Tim Carney. They'll be here tomorrow live at 9 a.m. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.